Welcome to Cognitive Crosshairs, where we examine the intricacies of the brain. I'm your host, Lydia Vermillion, and today we're going to be discussing what has been dubbed the Battle Royale of the Brain, as we continue our discussion of memory and information storage. Before we get into our new topic, let's do a little bit of review of what we discussed in our last episode. Right, so last time we talked about the actual memory process, or how the brain forms a new memory. When simplified, this becomes 3 steps that we'll quickly review with our pen example. We all know what a pen is now, but at one point we didn't, so how do we go from not knowing to not even having to think about it? Well, our first step is called encoding, and essentially this is our brain's ability to organize information. When we first are given a new object, say our pen here, the brain uses our full scale of senses to analyze it, to figure out what it is until it's confident it knows enough about the object that it can give it a name or put it into a category. We'll either find a pre-existing one or make a new one depending upon what the object is and how much the brain knows about it. The next step is going to be storage. This is where we're able to define our ability to recognize information and differentiating that information between familiar and unfamiliar categories. This step is really crucial and quite fascinating because it allows me to remember what an object is, even if it leaves my field of senses and re-enters into it. This theory means I don't have to go through the encoding process each time I see the pen again. I have done it once, I don't need to do it again. From there, the brain moves on to the retrieval stage, defined as our ability to access information we've had encoded and stored. When in this stage, the brain can apply concepts to objects across categories and even unrelated things. My retrieval skills allow me to differentiate a pen from a pencil, compare it to a crayon, or to something completely unrelated, like maybe a piece of paper, or a water bottle, or a lamp. It's fascinating, actually, the amount of brain power it takes to make a memory. This is not an easy process. One thing people often don't realize is that your brain goes through the process of scanning objects and environments constantly. Every day, 24/7, the brain is analyzing what it knows and what it doesn't know. It's really taxing, energy-consuming, and space-cluttering work. The problem is, despite the brain's sophistication, it just isn't able to make sure that everything is under its full attention all at once, and it doesn't want to. So this is where we run into the battle royale, the brain versus the unexpected. But there's good news. The brain has created its own incredible strategy that we've come to call the cognitive miser theory, and it knows just how to deal with too much information. Since the brain does a great deal of things, there are many ways that this strategy can be implemented and used, but we're going to look at just a few things that are more centered around the prefrontal cortex today. So we have the brain and the cognitive miser theory, and now we're looking at 2 strategies of implementation. The first kind of mising is called a schema. They act as mental models or blueprints to categorize information. They're built over time and are great because they are very reliable and easily adaptable. Each time something goes into a schema, it acts as a data point, helping to build a pattern. Because of their reliability, our brains like to outsource decisions to them, so this is what's happening when you make a decision even without thinking about it. For example, if you're going to work the same way every single day, you build your schema of what this experience is. Your brain, or your schema, comes to recognize what traffic lights you'll stop at, how long it takes, and make decisions based on your schemas, not the actual information that's being processed visually in the moment. Your brain knows what's going to happen, therefore it's going to make space for the brain to focus on other things, like giving the cars around you more attention instead of where you're going. The cars are new and unpredictable, therefore they require more attention to keep you alive. The second primary mising method is called dual process thinking. Your brain basically has 2 systems. System 1 is the fast, reactive thinker. It makes gut decisions based on the most readily available information, but that isn't always the most reliable. Decisions made by this system are then submitted to System 2, the editor. System 2 has access to more information that is more reliable but still limited by your working memory, and it either accepts or rejects the decision that System 1 makes. This process is basically your brain's way of delegating the information so that it can just worry about the big things. It doesn't need to worry about every single little decision made all the way up the chain of command. Now let's go check out the brain's opponent. It's the unexpected. This is anything we are forced to give attention to that takes up our valuable processing space. Our brain hates when things are different from the patterns it knows because it's hardwired to focus on the things that stand out. And this is actually a really awesome survival skill. The unexpected requires our attention and therefore makes the brain work harder than it wants to. Early humans developed this distaste for anything different than the norm because it helped them identify dangers in their environment. We don't necessarily have these kinds of dangers that they were looking for in our day-to-day now, but this is what the aim of the system is. It's to look for dangers. But danger looks a lot different in today's world, and it comes in the form of too much input. With 1,000 things needing our attention, it's simply not feasible for us to do it all and be successful. So let's look at some strategies that we can employ for ourselves that can trick our brains into focusing on what we want to prioritize. Let's look back at the schemas first. They help us divert information, but they are also very helpful in organizing it. Take advantage of this process and use it to train your brain to react differently to different environments. For example, make your work environment, such as your desk, your sleeping environment, your bed, and your relaxing environment, maybe the couch or living room, different from each other. Separate these things mentally so that your brain knows which schema it should go to when it's in that environment, and as a result, you'll be more productive, you'll be able to take a break and actually relax and not worry about your priorities when your brain is in relax mode, and you'll be able to sleep better because your brain knows it's okay to shut off and it can stop worrying about the things of the day. Another thing you can do, give your brain breaks in between periods of intense focus. Your ability to recall what you've been studying will improve, as will your productivity. You can also tell a story to link events together and add in some fantastical elements. Your brain remembers things that stand out, we know this, so try and think of analogies, acronyms, or similes that make things easier to remember. That way they won't get confused with everything else going on in your head and you'll turn mundane into imagination. Lastly, be curious. Asking questions is a great way to get your brain's thinking systems going, and curiosity increases memory by creating new neural pathways. Hopefully, we got your gears turning today, and you'll be able to utilize this brain hack. Let me know how it goes, and come back next week for another episode of Cognitive Crosshairs.